Hello there. So I'm Ellie, a chronic pain specialist, and this week we're going to be having a quick discussion about essential oils and their relevance to headaches and face pain, jaw pain, that kind of thing. So what we're going to be doing is just having a brief overview on what I think about essential oils and the use of them for pain. And I'd really like to know if this is something that you have tried and how you've got on with it, or something that you're interested in trying yourself. And if you'd like to know more about this, then let me know, because I'll be quite happy to go a bit more in depth and look at remedies and things like that. So personally, I have some history with essential oils in my previous work, where formulation was a big part of my job. And sort of because of that, and because I just really love essential oils, I have a huge amount of them floating around my house. You may be able to see some of my shelves there in the background. So let's have a look at some of the oils that I have found most helpful when it comes to headaches, and then we can just have a quick look at how to use them. So the number one oil that really springs to mind for headaches is peppermint oil. You may well have used this in the past. It's quite easy to get hold of. And the reason why peppermint oil is so effective is because it contains menthol, which is associated with relieving muscles. So relieving muscle tension, knots in muscles, that kind of thing, when it's applied to the skin. And you can sort of see this in a lot of things, like when you buy deep heat and that kind of thing, it usually has menthol in it. So that's a kind of gives us an idea that the menthol has good results in causing muscle relaxation. Yeah, so obviously just make sure that it is diluted heavily if you are applying it to the skin. But also inhaling peppermint oil can be really effective, and it seems to have a similar effect on the relaxation of muscles as well. So peppermint oil is my number one go-to. Second oil that I really love is rosemary oil. Now, I love this for any type of anything, any excuse basically, because it's one of those real kind of deeper herbal type of scents. We're all familiar with rosemary. And I just love the sort of grounding feeling that I feel that rosemary has. And it is also really well known to be anti-inflammatory, which I think kind of explains why it can have a good result with headaches. And what's really always really interesting to me about these things is that rosemary was used, back hundreds of years ago, if not thousands of years ago, for the topical treatment of pain, so it's kind of like now we have some science behind it to prove why that is. But it's like just really sort of a good example of a lot of these things where we look back in time, we can really see that this was known. And then we actually later on, science goes on to prove it. I just think that's quite amazing. So anyway, the third oil that I would really recommend for headaches is lavender oil. Again, super easy to get hold of. You can pick it up in sort of Holland & Barrett or some chemists as well. And lavender oil is really great for calming the body and calming the brain. And we know that stress is a major player in headaches. So really that sort of covers some bases when we're thinking about headaches and pain in general. There's that sort of muscle relaxation element of the peppermint oil, the anti-inflammatory properties of the rosemary oil, and the de-stressing properties of the lavender oil, which are really all important factors when it comes to pain and headaches. And the really sort of interesting thing about scent, so if we think of rather than just applying them to the body heavily diluted, is that when we inhale them through a diffuser, etc., then the scent actually bypasses the area in the brain called the thalamus, and the thalamus is responsible for filtering before the messages get delivered into the primary cortex. So with a scent, the scent basically gets there unfiltered. It doesn't go through this thalamus, so it doesn't go through this filtering process. So it actually is received in the brain without that filter of whether, the filter is largely to do with, is this relevant? Because imagine your brain being bombarded with everything, the thalamus helps you actually decide whether this is relevant information before it passes it on. Whereas scents, they don't actually go through that process. They just get delivered straight away to be processed. So often this is the reason why scents can evoke such strong memories. So, when you smell a smell and suddenly you're taken way back in time because that hasn't been filtered out. So I just find that, as an aside, I just find that concept really interesting. And in the past, I've had products made for me when I was suffering with headaches a few years back, in the form of a aromatherapy stick. So it's kind of like this plastic stick that is a bit like, you get those Vicks, kind of old-fashioned Vicks things that you inhale. A friend of mine used to make these aromatherapy sticks. In fact, she still does. That you can just smell them whenever you feel like it. And the scent lasted for ages. So I was using that for years, really, afterwards. So it was a worthwhile investment. And, I didn't necessarily use it when I had a headache. I just used it sort of if I was in a queue for a shop, or, whenever I thought, I carried it around in my bag and I used it whenever I thought about it. And it's just kind of a nice sort of grounding self-care thing to do, especially sort of on the fly when you're in a rush. So that is one way that you can use essential oils, is by inhaling them, perhaps on a scent stick, aromatherapy stick, or, even on, people don't really have hankies these days, but something like that can be just dab a bit on in the morning and carry it around with you. Or even on your pillow can be another way of an easy way to make sure that you're inhaling the scent. And another super easy way is to buy one of those roller sticks that you can get. So you basically just rub that onto your pulse point. Or what I really love, which I do in my clinic all the time, is to diffuse the oil in an oil burner or an electric diffuser. I personally really like the oil burner, because you have the sort of ceremony of lighting the candle, which I always think is really nice. So really, that's my top ways of using them, is dab a bit on a pillow or a hanky to inhale, or diffuse them into the room. I think both of those are really nice ways of using essential oils. And one thing to note, that it's really important to use actually essential oils rather than anything that is labeled as a fragrance oil, because these are often, always really synthetic, so they don't have the same properties that an essential oil actually has. And my last tip really with essential oils is not to just turn to them when you're in pain, but to actually just make them part of your everyday life. So, you put especially if it's sort of colder weather and you're indoors, put an oil burner on when you're actually feeling well, because that's often the time that we need to be sort of maintaining that wellness, rather than waiting until we feel unwell and then turning to these remedies. So that's my last tip really, is don't just turn to them when you're feeling a bit unwell or suffering. Even when you feel good, then try and sort of incorporate them into your life. So I'd love to hear from you on whether you've had any experience of using essential oils, and if you're going to give any of those oils a try, or if you've tried any of them already. It'd be really great to get your feedback, so do let me know.